Yeah, and also middle school is one of those times where your sense of self and the things you believe in is probably the most malleable. I think that personally, I had the most development in my entire life during 6th to 8th grade. It's just such a period of growth. And it's really, really important that people like us and, of course, teachers and parents and all of that do what they can to help these kids develop in the right way so that they can think for themselves and not just, listen to the news they see on TikTok and things that might not necessarily be the most truthful or might not help them have the most educated opinions. So we were thinking, these kids are just now getting onto social media, just now maybe starting to talk about politics with each other or with their parents, and this is the perfect time to help them create their own opinions.
Welcome to the Voices United in Education podcast. Each week, we showcase the teachers, administrators, and community members who go the extra mile to contribute to the success of every student in Escambia County. You'll meet the real people behind the titles and learn about the amazing resources to support every student's success. If you've ever been concerned about kids these days, my next guest will not just be a bright spot, but give hope for the future. They are recent graduates of Pensacola High School, where they were International Baccalaureate seniors. They used their final project as a way to bring civic education to young people. And today, together with the IB College counselor, they're going to share what inspired them, how it works, and what's next. Converting creativity to service and information to action, Gloria Eligio, Dylan Patterson, and Audrey Foss. Thanks for being here, guys.
Thanks for having
us.
So, Gloria, can you give us some background of the IB program?
Yes, and we're so fortunate. We have a historian, Dr. Colleen Boyette. Her training's in history, and so she is very good about sharing the history of IB with everyone. And Kurt Hahn was one of the founders of IB. IB stands for International Baccalaureate, and it was founded to help families of diplomats had children that were traveling all over the world, getting education in multiple locations, and they wanted to have a standardized system of education. But in addition to that, Kurt Hahn, he grew up in Germany during World War I, World War II, and was seeing what was going on there and the very authoritarian regime that was happening there, and how education was very teacher-centered. And along with him and the Montessori educational movement, there was this ideal that him, along with many other educators, wanted to instill in their students. They wanted students to explore and wanted to build the whole person, right? So instead of just having a teacher in the middle of the classroom talking at students, they wanted students to get out there and do something, right? So Kurt Hahn, along with IB, also founded Outward Bound, it's very outdoor education focused. He also founded the United World Colleges movement. He also founded Gordonston, which King Charles III was educated at. And it all focused not only just on the academics, but also on getting students out there and exploring. And so with IB, that's really a cornerstone of what our students do. Not only do they get educated academically in a very rigorous way, there's also other ways that students are exploring and doing independent education. So it's a very unique feature of IB.
Wow, that's incredible. I mean, when you think about history, I know this is a little rabbit trail, but when you think about history, especially war history, like all the things that would have not happened had it not been for the impact of the war. And what a silver lining that the IB program was one of them. So tell me about the final project, the CAST project.
Yes, so CAST stands for Creativity, Activity, and Service. And this is definitely a feature that Kurt Hahn wanted instilled. So as IB diploma candidates, one of the things that students have to do, they have to dabble in some experiences that challenge them creatively as well as physically, right? So they are supposed to do activities that are both creative and physical in nature. But they also have to complete a CAST project. It's a service-based project that they have to complete. And one of the unique features about this, I think everybody knows of high school students that are going out and volunteering, right? They go to the soup kitchens or they go to the Humane Society, and those are all great things, but the really unique feature about the CAST project is it has to be initiated by the student. They have to take charge. They have to find something that they're passionate about, an issue within their community, and do something about it. And so that's one of the key features. As I've told students, and Dylan and Audrey can attest, they shouldn't just be doing what everybody else does, right?
Yeah.
When they're going and working with an organization. And so what Dylan and Audrey did very well is that they took their passion for law and they're like, we're really concerned about youth today. We don't think they're...
How adorable is it that you're all like, kids these days, am I right? Hey, we have a solution.
Yeah. No, and I remember y'all coming in and your heart was just so, it was just so good. You saw that there's this gap of knowledge that kids have, right? They have this passion for being active, but there's a gap in knowledge of what they want to do and how they can get there, right? And so you guys came to me about this project, and I know I had a couple of little things that I wanted to do that I, gave for advice, but really it was your project and y'all ran with it. And it was just really neat to see your passion for civic engagement and law turn into something really cool.
Yeah, so tell me more about what inspired you. And I want to know the timeline because I want to know how y'all are like connected. Were you walking down the hall one day complaining about kids? Or, I mean, you started high school in 2020. There was a lot to complain about.
Absolutely.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. So going like out of middle school, I went to two middle schools in Escambia County that are failing. One of them has already become a charter school, and the other one, I think they've been looking at it for a few years. And so leaving that area where a lot of the kids were passionate about things, but they were often unsure of like how to go about exploring them, or they were just like uneducated in like what their actual rights were. They just had a lot of misunderstandings, and that was something that I saw leaving middle school. And then going into freshman year, I did the law academy at Pensacola High School, which we unfortunately don't have anymore, but it was really fun while we did. And whenever I did that, the teacher encouraged me to join Teen Court, which is a local organization. And instead of sending kids to juvie, if they plead guilty, they're able to have essentially a jury of kids their own age decide what they have to do for community service. And so like you choose how many hours they have to do. You choose what kind of courses they take to make up for their crime. And then after I did that, that's whenever I really started thinking about, I heard about the CAST project in IB. That's whenever I was like, okay, I think that's that's sort of what I want to do. And then in sophomore year, whenever we were all talking about we have to start finalizing our CAST project proposals. And I started talking about it to Audrey, and instantly Audrey wanted to join on.
Yeah.
Because I had nothing at that point, essentially.
So your initial contribution was like, hey, we should do this.
Essentially.
And then you're like, great, what is this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I feel like when we first started, we didn't have the same idea for what our project was as we do now. Like originally, I know your idea was to focus on Miranda rights.
Yes.
Yeah, focus on a very specific aspect of civics and just do the in-class presentations. And when we got together and started talking, we realized that, we can start doing an essay contest and cover a broad range of civic standards. And that would be a really cool way to, help out some of the kids that might need some extra support in the area of civics.
Wow, that's incredible. So that turned into the part of the project where you chose who this is going to serve.
Yes.
And you chose middle schoolers?
Yes.
I'm going to need some explanation on that, because when I think about civil engagement, people who have differing ideas and they exchange them in a civilized way, I do not think about middle schoolers. When I think about 6-second TikTok videos, I think about middle schoolers. So why was it important that middle schoolers be the group of people that receive this project?
Well, personally, like I was saying, going to Teen Court and also the two middle schools, I noticed that a lot of the times when kids were making these life-altering mistakes that would get them sent to juvie or give them permanent records, they were often doing them right out of middle school or in middle school. And I think that was a large reason why I was like, this is the demographic that really needs to be talked to, because high schoolers are already hearing about it from, the kids that are older than them, their parents, their teachers around them. But middle schoolers, I've noticed that they often lack that mentorship and that foundation. And that's whenever they were making these really bad mistakes. And that's part of why I was like, I really think that we should talk to them and try to get them more interested in the community. So that way they aren't negatively impacting it and themselves.
Yeah, and also middle school is one of those times where your sense of self and the things you believe in is probably the most malleable. I think that personally, I had the most development in my entire life during 6th to 8th grade. It's just such a period of growth. And it's really, really important that people like us, and of course teachers and parents and all of that, do what they can to help these kids develop in the right way so that they can think for themselves and not just, listen to the news they see on TikTok and things that might not necessarily be the most truthful or might not help them have the most educated opinions. So we were thinking, these kids are just now getting onto social media, just now maybe starting to talk about politics with each other or with their parents, and this is the perfect time to help them create their own opinions.
Oh, I love that. Okay, so tell me what it looks like. What is the experience from the point of view of a middle schooler?
We actually did do a sort of like a mock presentation, except it was like an actual one, but it was just our trial run at the Creative Learning Academy where Audrey went to middle school, because her old teacher, Amy Parker, is actually our cast supervisor. So she kind of helped us organize our project, and like she would give us the names of like some of the people in the community that we should reach out to. And so we actually did do a presentation at the Creative Learning Academy where we asked the kids to give us feedback. And for the most part, I would say it was pretty positive. They enjoyed it, but we did try to incorporate their feedback. So like they wanted more questions. That was one of the things they wanted, was for it to be more interactive.
Yeah.
And so
Makes
after
sense.
that, we made it a point to ask more questions. And we also started like handing out candy during our presentation to make it more like interactive and get the kids excited to actually answer
Anytime
the
you can
questions.
make it a little bit more like Mardi Gras, that's winning.
Yeah.
That's winning.
And another thing is we're not that much older than them. We were in their shoes like maybe, 5-6 years ago. And so I feel like we kind of had a really good perspective on what these middle schoolers would like, what they would enjoy hearing about, and in which ways we should be teaching this to them. And so one of the things that I remember I really liked in middle school was doing Kahoots, like online games where you answer questions and there's a leaderboard and everything like that. And so right off the bat, we were like, okay, we need to do a Kahoot so that everyone actually pays attention to our presentation, and then we can give them a reward, candy, after they are done, and if they get first place or second or third or whatever.
Oh, that's so smart. I didn't think about the fact that they would look up to you in a different way than they would someone who is the age of their parents.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, but tell me what the actual presentation consisted of, the actual program, if you will.
Yeah, so we cover, I think, maybe 15 civic standards that they need for their civics EOC that they take at the end of 7th grade. And so we cover a broad range of those, but it was more the things that we found most important for them to know about at this age. We didn't really cover like the history of the Constitution too much and things like that. We more covered, the amendments, certain rights that affect them in their day-to-day life, and as well as helping them learn about important figures that are in our political system, making sure that they know, who the president is, who the vice president is, things like that.
How did you take it beyond memorizing? Because, when you're a kid and you're like, hey, there'll be a test, whether it's Kahoots or affecting your grade, there is a route memorization component that doesn't really resonate. How did you make it resonate?
Yeah, I think that one of the things is adding a lot of examples, things that, because when you're learning about it in your civics class, it feels just, you're studying for your tests. You don't really think about how it applies to you. So we used a lot of examples to make sure they understood that these are things that actually affect them. It isn't just like a bunch of old dudes who wrote up a document. It's like, it's really, really, really important, and here's why. So we tried to, present it from a different angle, like, oh, this amendment affects you because, and that's part of the reason that our essay contest was so important, I think, because we kind of force them to think critically about the different concepts that they're learning in their civics class instead of just kind of reciting them and regurgitating the information they learned.
What was an example of how you tied it into their daily lives?
When we were in our presentation, I wanted to focus heavily on like the 19th Amendment and things like that, kind of relating to the other girls in the classroom saying, hey, we didn't always have the right to vote, and now we do. You need to understand how important it is that you go out and vote because 100 years or a little over 100 years ago, you wouldn't have been able to do that. And that's kind of one of the ways that I personally wanted to connect with the girls in the class. But there were definitely other examples. And we saw that in our essay contest. People wrote about a wide variety of different amendments. I think some of the most popular was obviously like the 19th Amendment, the First Amendment.
The 14th was
The
also
14th,
very
yes.
popular.
Yes.
And I think when y'all came to me, your initial focus seemed to be the First Amendment rights as students. I think that was something that was very important to your class, right? Just being able to speak your opinion, but do so in an informed way within the realm of the educational system and and do so in a respectful manner. So I understand that was a big focus. So I mean, is that something that my understanding is that something you address with your middle school students and teaching them how to do that in the right way?
The First Amendment?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
yeah,
yes.
just petitioning and speaking
and like ensuring that you're like non-inflammatory with your language and like, seeking out like proper sources. That was definitely something that we...
Yeah, speaking of proper sources, a big thing that we did talk about was misinformation. That kind of plays a large role, especially with, technology is so new, social media and all that is so new that I don't really think that everyone knows the best ways to spot misinformation and how to have an educated opinion, how to form that opinion. So that's kind of a big thing that we covered as well. So
tell me more about that.
Yeah.
Unpack that a little bit, because most adults don't know how to get information. Because let me give you a little insight to the elders of our community. So like I grew up with both, with no internet, no digital anything, and then boom, internet. But your parents grew up only with digital. So all they know is Charlie bit my finger. Do you know about Charlie bit my finger?
I remember that.
You know, okay. That's the internet your parents know and love. It is innocent. It is delightful. Nothing bad can happen, and everything on it is true. Okay. So like they don't even know how to find credible sources. So I mean, tell me how you explained it to kids, because I think people listening would even want to know.
One of the things that we talked about is whenever you're looking for news sources is to look at the kind of language that they're using. If they're using inflammatory and sort of derogatory, very biased language, then that's kind of an indicator that, and that's one of the things that we talked about, is that that's an indicator that the source may be skewed and trying to portray an event as being different from what it may have been. We did have to be really careful talking about the different sources and things, though, because we couldn't like outright say like, oh, this source isn't necessarily credible, because we did have to make sure that we were very nonpartisan with our presentation. And so for the most part for that, we just kind of encouraged them to not take it directly from like social media, TikTok, and to instead look for third-party verified sources that, they have reviews, that are credible, and to specifically look for sources that are not portraying things like biased in a biased manner.
No, and I know one of the cornerstones of, again, just to bring it back to IB, theory of knowledge, I know that's a class where you guys really had to think critically. And that's a theory of knowledge is an epistemological class, right? Where the question is, how do we know what we know, right? Yeah. And so it's really nice to see you both kind of take that initiative with that knowledge of like, let's think really critically about how knowledge is disseminated and, how is it disseminated in different subject areas and how is knowledge disseminated in the natural sciences versus art versus all these different things. And so I'm sure you guys were tired of writing up bibliographies and, and doing all those sorts of things, but I'm really just being able to back up what you say and what information you're providing to people. So that's really neat to see. But
that's major, Gloria.
Absolutely.
Knowing, how do I know what I know?
How do you know what you know?
And that is so, because as a student, you hear a lot of voices. And I mean that in the non-psychosis way. You hear the voice of your teacher, your parents, your coaches, and you want to please all of them. But how do you, within all of that, know what your own voice is? Like, do I want this because I want a good grade? Do I want this because I want to please my parents? Or is this what I want? And finding your own voice is difficult for lots of people. And for those individuals who are very empathetic, it becomes even more complicated because you're like, am I feeling my own feelings or am I feeling the feelings of the people in the room? This is, it really adds lots of layers to that.
No, and with theory of knowledge, it's really about unpacking those biases, right, of other people and not taking things on face value. So many, and that's really that critical analysis that you're asking those students to do and that you both have done, right? and not taking things on face value. And so much of what we see on the internet, they're saying, that it's just being thrown in your face and they want you to take it on face value. But there's so much history behind all those statements that are coming out, and there's so much background knowledge that needs to be provided, context that needs to be provided to really understand what's going on, and all those different things that become a lot more complex that way, but you get to understand them in a different way and be more informed. So,
and this is all a part of the IB program, the epistocracy, kind of like all this stuff.
Oh, and so theory of knowledge is part of what they call the core of IB. So any IB diploma candidate, they take a course in one of the 6 subjects. So that's English, world language, math, science, social studies, and the arts or an elective. And then we have the core. So there's theory of knowledge. Again, we're really asking students, how do we know what we know, right? Again, not to just take things on face value. How do we gain knowledge from math, the natural sciences, art, religion? And we gain knowledge in all those different aspects. Students also write an extended essay. That's a 4,000 independent research question. Again, really engaging that critical thinking, right? Independent. And then, of course, CAS, creativity, activity, and service. That's what they call the heart of IB. So you're taking all those different components of IB, that academic knowledge, the critical thinking, and you're going out into the world using those gifts and talents to make it a better place. And that's really what I think sets IB apart. And different academic programs have, tried copying that in different ways. But IB really does focus on making international, globally minded citizens that are actively engaged in their community. So I think that's something Audrey and Dylan did really well, is that they wanted to instill that in middle school students as they're coming up. They're already primed for that. They're learning civic engagement in their classes, and they're about to get bombarded in high school with all of these different thoughts and opinions. And oftentimes, middle school is definitely a smaller place, and especially with school choice that we have here in Escambia County, students go from, their little small middle school to a lot of different places that you're part of this cultural milieu that's probably really different than your middle school. I know for both of you, probably coming to PHS was a little bit different.
Yeah.
And that's good. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why you chose to be at IB at PHS. But you need to be ready to face differing opinions and to think about it critically and to be able to provide your own opinion on that. So I think, again, this project was something that was really great just because you were able to take that critical reflexivity, right? You're able to really take that critical knowledge and being able to analyze things and take that to middle school students.
So important.
Challenge
and
them.
I think that the core of what Gloria is saying is exactly, if I'm hearing you right, what you wanted to pass on, but just a little earlier.
Yes. Yeah.
And how smart that y'all have done that. So this sounds like an amazing program that you've set up. What happens to it after you're gone? Because you're graduated.
Yeah, well, we're hoping to expand. We're not going to be near each other. I'm going to Virginia and he's going to North Carolina for college, but
to Washington and Lee and Duke University. We're very excited for them. I have to plug that in there as the college counselor.
Super excited. Yeah, but we'll definitely be working remotely, but we are definitely working on people that can take over our chapter in Pensacola and hoping to find people in other parts of the country that can start their own chapters and turn this into kind of more of a national thing.
We actually have had someone reach out to us from California who is interested in starting a chapter out there. We do need to, that's still very early though, and so we need to see how that's going to work out.
Yeah. We're definitely going to get plugged in more with social media, making sure we can find other high schoolers with similar passions all across the country and hopefully start something that has a broader impact on the country as a whole. So that's definitely our main goal for this coming year.
Yes.
That's exciting. So how many schools in Escambia County have the IB program? Because I feel like that would be low-hanging fruit for spreading the program that you've started.
Yeah, so Pensacola High School is the only one in Escambia County. Okay. The closest one is at Choctaw High School in Okaloosa County. So and we're bigger than our diploma program is a little bit bigger than theirs. But yeah, we're the only one in Escambia County.
Wow, that's so special. That's so awesome that y'all were able to do this.
Yeah.
And that you're spreading these concepts through the packaged differently so that more high schools could experience them. As we wrap up, Audrey, you're a fellow podcaster. I want to hear all about your show.
Yeah, so I've been taking a bit of a break, but I have a pod chat. Excuse me.
A pod chat. Actually,
Yeah,
like that. I like that a lot.
I have a podcast called Education with Audrey Foss, where I talk about kind of more my personal views on different educational issues. I'm planning on starting to post again this coming school year. I've been taking a break, but, I have so many opinions on different issues, and I think it's really important to, share my opinions, and hopefully people out there will kind of see my perspective and consider it and hopefully, learn something. So yeah, it's called Education with Audrey Foss. It's on Spotify. And I believe I also have an Instagram called @Education with Audrey Foss. So
that's exciting. And because what you did with IB and what you're doing with Young Citizens Development is all about finding your voice, how perfect that you have a podcast. It will be very interesting to check in with you 10 years from now to look back at the opinions that you shared on your podcast, while you were a senior in high school.
Like a time capsule.
Yeah.
It really is. That's the cool thing about podcasting.
Yeah.
So
it'd be interesting to see how different issues that I talk about have changed and evolved since then, too.
And didn't you interview the former president of the Southern Poverty Law Center?
Yes, I did. I interviewed Richard Cohen, I believe last summer. It's almost a year ago.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, but we talked a lot about, how hate affects our overall society, but also in terms of schools. And that was definitely my favorite episode that I've done. You should definitely go check it out.
Do you know the episode number?
I think it might have been my second one. It's really very early.
That's awesome. Well, we will definitely link that in the show notes because that's super cool. Where can we find out more about the Young Citizens Development and the IB program?
Yeah, so Young Citizens Development has a website. It's just www.youngcitizensdevelopment.org. And we also are starting up our Instagram.
Yes,
Do you remember the username?
I believe it's just Young Citizens at Young Citizens Development, and we will be posting on that more in the coming months as we're figuring out who's taking over our project and sort of the direction that they want to go with it next year, if they want to do the exact same thing or if they want to focus more on essays or presentations.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then to learn more about the IB program, you can really just type in Pensacola High School IB, and our website will pop up, and you can get the emails for our IB coordinator, Dr. Colleen Boyette. She's amazing, or myself, and just learn a little bit more about how our program is run and just what IB is all about.
Thank you all. This was awesome, and you don't need it, but I wish you the best of luck in all that's next.
Thank you
so
having
much.
us.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe and share. Voices United in Education is a production of Escambia County Public Schools.